Bravo. Yeah, that sounded great. That sounded really great.
Thanks.
Um, yeah, so I mean, honestly, in terms of like tone quality and intonation and a lot of style, I think you're like hitting it right on the head.
Okay.
Exactly what I would expect.
Okay.
Kind of getting a little philosophical here, what is a cadenza?
I guess it's a chance to, for lack of a better term, not freestyle, but um, sort of like, even though what's written on the page is sort of like stylistic improv and not necessarily note improv or chord improv from the jazz perspective. It's kind of how I take that approach. More a
Absolutely.
lot of rubato, even though rubato is only one aspect of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And while I see like some hints at that, I feel like you could go a lot further with it.
Okay.
I mean, even in the very beginning with those opening eighth notes, right underneath of it, forte, and then it says rubato. So I'm kind of hearing you play it this way. You know, basically straight in time.
Okay.
And I think there could be a little more push and pull in there. So it's not that I want you to play it exactly like me, but I just think about bending time a little bit more in the beginning.
Okay.
Um, so again, please take your own stamp at it, but just be a little looser. Can I hear maybe about that far through whatever that is, measure eight or so? Another
Okay.
pass at it. That was great. I mean,
Okay.
I really liked. I like an interpretation more like that than being
Mhm.
so strict in time.
Okay.
Um, and then the only other thing I would say, so okay, we're going to add more push and pull. Are there any moments where you could put a slight pause that you think it might make sense?
7, 8, 9. Yeah, in bar 10, before the triplet run with the accelerando, even though there's a tie, I've toyed with both ways, and I feel like I like the idea of that break there, but I know that people who I've asked don't really always agree with me.
So you mean like where the ties are, it's sort of like there's a fermata in that moment rather than being in time?
Not necessarily, well, to a certain extent, being in time, the second tie, I guess, between beat 3 and the tie to beat 4 of bar 10, like a little bit of, maybe just more like space rather than a break.
Oh, sure. And then you can take a breath and then get into that
Partly for
accelerando.
the breath and partly for style. I mean, the other one that's marked in the version that I have is in bar 13 between the dotted eighth and the 16th on beat 4.
Yeah, you're right. That's a moment that is marked where you could take a little bit of time. Another two other places that I like, and I agree with you. I don't think putting a slight break in measure 10 is bad. I
Okay.
think if it's done well, it can be really
Okay.
effective. Um, but another spot I sometimes like to think about is right at the beginning of bar 12. You know, dee da 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 dee da da dee da dum dee dum. you know, so
Okay.
kind of a moment again for some drama to build and for you to
Yeah.
get a nice big breath so that that maybe will feel more comfortable. And
Okay.
then similarly, right before measure 17.
Oh, okay. At the end of the 2/4?
Yeah. I
Okay.
think, again, this is like personal taste, and it might be that you're like, I don't like it. But,
Mm.
and I also think with each of those moments of space, they should not all be the same amount of time. You should probably
Okay.
try and figure out which one do I want to be the most dramatic, which one's going to be my longest break, which ones are going to be faster, you know? But uh, something like from
Okay.
from an orchestra standpoint, also that helps line up we're together at this moment. If you kind of put that
Right.
slight little break.
Yeah. Okay.
My least favorite valve combination on the trumpet is 2 and 3. I hate it.
Okay.
I
Okay.
am most likely to chip a 2 and 3, so like a G sharp or an A flat, and
Hmm.
that's happening to you a little bit with those repeated, you know, right? So just really be mindful there of thinking fingers, you know.
Hmm.
So much of the time we're thinking about chops and we're thinking about, like a powerful sound, and we forget that fingers are half the battle too.
Right. Okay.
But honestly, you already had a really nice product. I'm just thinking like, how can we make it more dramatic and
Okay.
more interesting? So,
Okay.
uh, why don't you do the whole thing for me again one more time? Just in general, adding a little more rubato and maybe thinking about adding a little bit of space in some of those spots. Yeah. How did that feel?
Better. Much better. Much more comfortable and more fun.
Yeah, yeah. And it gives off, I mean, like, I think the reason why so many trumpet players love this concerto is it's like we get to live our like hero fantasy. It's like every great movie soundtrack, right? So like if we think of adjectives, we think of like confident or like swashbuckling, or so just taking more time is kind of your way of being like, I'm not moving. Like this is how I think this should sound. It fits in that kind of hero character arc, if that makes sense, you know? So, one thing that I like to do sometimes is I will, uh, so like for example, measure 35. beats 3 and beats 4. I might kind of do it in a loop where I do it a couple times in a row. First time I slur everything. Second time I isolate my tonguing just on one note or maybe two notes. So like
Okay.
double tonguing on E naturals or maybe 4 E naturals, 4 E flats, you know. And then I put it together and I play it the way it's written. See how great that was? That was
Mm-hmm.
super duper clean. Yeah. So I like kind of doing that kind of practice over something technical. And
Okay.
then, you know, you could maybe back up and do the whole phrase that way. Slur the whole
Okay.
phrase.
Okay.
Tongue the whole phrase just on like the starting note on B flat. Then play it as written. And so it's, you know, the purpose behind it is if we're slurring everything, we're making sure that our air support is constant and that we're hearing those intervals correctly, right?
Right.
If we're tonguing just on one note, we're basically just taking a level of complexity away. I'm not worrying about fingers or pitches anymore. I'm just thinking, what's my tongue doing? And
Okay.
then when I do it the way it's written, I just try to kind of copy and paste from those other two things so that it makes a really clean run.
Okay.
All of us want a nice, dark, warm sound. And sometimes we try to get there by what I call artificially darkening by playing flat, like unintentionally, but we're just overdoing it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, in your practicing, do you ever spend any time with a drone by any chance?
Not enough. Not
But you
nearly as much
have
as
at
I should.
least.
It's something that our director in the community band talks about all the time. Use a metronome and use a drone. Um, and I should do it more. I don't have a reason why I don't, but everyone talks about it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's just one of those things. Sometimes you're not, you just forget, you know. And to be quite honest, uh, during the pandemic, the two things that I think all of us lose more easily is intonation and time, because we're playing by ourselves. We're not in groups nearly as much as we would normally be,
Right.
you know. So I think just doing a little bit of drone work, which I've found can be hard for us to do over Zoom, unfortunately. But um,
Okay.
something else though, for wanting a desirable warm tone, you know, um, one way that we can warm up our sound is by playing around with our airspeed. I heard a little bit from you. Where it really crescendoed, and I feel like you could still get loud, but can we do it with maybe slowing the air down just a little bit and think warmer tone quality?
Okay.
Or even
Sure.
right at the get go, at the beginning with the piano.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thinking about my airspeed as being more and never letting it get, because I don't think we need it.
Okay.
Yes, what you think?
More comfortable. I mean, generally, it just felt, yeah. That's, I think, part of the reason I was struggling with this, because it felt like I was either trying to do too much or I was like sitting on something and not doing enough, and it feels like it's really just the one extreme.
Yeah, I would say so. And I think you could. So now, I mean, essentially what we've done is you've just backed off your dynamics a little bit. And
Right.
that has made things sound warmer and more relaxed. Another thing to consider with any lyric, well, really with any section of music, period, but certainly in a lyrical section, if we look at letter N, you want to make sure that even when there are rests, you're not necessarily breaking the phrase through that rest. So, not necessarily taking a breath there, making sure your energy is continuing through that rest. So, um, I think before you took a breath in at least one of those spots, if not both, maybe.
At least one of them, yeah, I don't remember, but I tend to do that.
And you don't need it. It's an easy thing to want to do,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it'll be more musically effective not to. So waiting until measure 255 to take a
Okay.
breath. And so in that bar in question, we've got a tenuto mark over the first eighth note of each little group, right? So can you make those figures sound more like a sigh? Dee
Okay.
rather than dee. So use your energy that you would have taken in the breath and put it into those tenuto marks.
it goes. Yeah, sorry.
Before you start, what's kind of going through your head before you get ready to start this piece?
Remembering when the B is natural and when it is not. Honestly, that is what's foremost in my mind.
Okay, cool. So you're kind of thinking about like fingerings and key signature.
Yeah, because fingerings have always been the hardest thing for me.
Okay, that's fair. Let's see if we can sort of shift your focus, and then if that helps it feel a little bit easier to get started. So we're in 5/8. Okay. In general, it sort of goes back and forth. A lot of times we can think of 5/8 as like 1 2 3 1 2 or 1 2 1 2 3. You know, or I see it as like the very first bar as being like a 1 2 1 2 3.
Okay.
Because we have that eighth note followed by 2/16. Dum ba dee ba da 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 deem. So 1 2 1 2 3 bum ba dee 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 dee. Right?
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm pointing this out to you is a lot of times I think what helps us start a solo piece is if we can think of taking a rhythmic breath.
Okay.
Now you're going at a pretty good clip. I would say let's slow it down just a little bit. Thinking more like 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 dig it 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 dig it.
Okay.
So think about that a little bit, and then when you're ready, take a rhythmic breath in time and start that phrase again.
Okay.
How did that feel?
Better.
Yeah, so much
Sounded
easier.
better too.
Yeah, and with that, in a performance setting where you're playing a fast piece and you're expecting yourself to feel some adrenaline, what do you think your tendency might be with your time to
Play it
drag or to
faster.
rush?
Play it faster.
Play it faster, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yep.
so that's another reason why I really preach like thinking about a rhythmic breath to get started, because then you're thinking about your desired tempo, and then you're setting yourself up with a breath for some success. Okay.
Yeah.
So the first three notes in this bar, it's a fifth leap, right? E down to A, back up to E.
Yeah.
That's a pretty wide interval. Okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes just getting those notes to slot and to cooperate can feel tricky, you know?
Yeah.
So let's try something a little different. Again, we're going to be way under tempo. Okay. But I'm going to connect, I'm just going to play those three notes, but I'm going to connect them with a scale. And for our purposes, well, this measure is kind of implying E major because we have a D sharp and we have a C sharp. So I'm going to play 4 sharps. So I'm going to have D sharp and C sharp in my scale here. Okay? So repeat after me. Great. And now I'm going to remove a couple of those notes. So I'm just going to do an arpeggio. E, C sharp, A, C sharp, E. Okay. So now those notes hopefully feel a little bit closer together, okay? Now I'm going to slur that measure as written. Great. And now play that measure for me the way it's written at tempo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully it feels a little bit easier and more manageable.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And now we're going to go back to the beginning.
Okay.
And I'd like you to buzz that much. But slight caveat. A lot of people, when we say, okay, I want you to buzz it, they try to make it sound on their mouthpiece the same way it does on their trumpet. So really worrying about like staccato notes or note separation and that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
instead, I think it's actually better just to be really, really glissy.
Okay.
Okay. So worrying a little less about being super duper accurate and more kind of like when you practice slurring it, just thinking about air support and trying to isolate those pitches in your ear. So
Okay.
something like that kind of idea. So just
Okay.
flooding the mouthpiece with air, not worrying about being super duper precise or short.
Okay.
You're a good sport. You're a good sport. That's great. I think honestly, for the most part, that was great.
Okay.
As we got into 12, so if we kind of check our pitches here.
I was probably too high.
So it was getting a little choppy.
Yeah.
And instead I just again want it to be glissy. So a little freer with your air support rather than little individual air streams.
Okay.
Can you do just that much for me? 12, 13, 14?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too high, but
We're ever so slightly too high, but I like the approach.
okay.
So now if you go back to your trumpet,
Yeah.
play from the beginning that far to the 6/8 bar, and just think about those things. Think about the way it sounded when you were singing it. Think about your air as you were buzzing it. Okay. And the only other thing I want you to think about before you start again is a rhythmic breath.
Rhythmic breath. I knew you were going to say that.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So how did that feel in comparison to how it normally
Good.
goes?
Felt good. No, it felt really good. I mean, I know it's one note got like, but I mean, what was better was the run through all the sharps, and the contrasting slurring and staccato section. That felt a little better.
Yeah, and what I also liked about it too is that it's sounding more horizontal. There's more musical motion through the phrase as opposed to being this is such an easy thing to get hung up on being perfect, and
Yeah.
it's a little tricky, and then we sort of turned into playing everything vertically. I think that approach was really free and easy.
Yeah.
What mood are you trying to convey here? What pictures might you have in your head as you're playing?
I'd love it to be, I mean, I think the beginning is meant to be sort of like tranquil and pastoral and reflective, like in a woodland kind of setting, and imagine a stream and, that kind of stuff. So I think that's really the way it's supposed to start out, is really kind of peaceful and tranquil and pastoral and whatever.
As trumpet players, we are artists. So using an analogy, if I was a painter and I'm wanting to paint some beautiful countryside, I'm probably going to use more than just one brush to create my painting, right? And I think a lot of times we don't think about this the same way, but the way that we approach articulation can be like choosing different brushes for different techniques. So generally speaking, for this first page, what style of articulation, like what kind of zone do we want to be in?
I mean, I would want it to be really legato.
So thinking about like, again, using that analogy, like what size brush do we want? I think I like your note lengths and how they're long. I just feel like in general the approach is a little heavy. One way that I like to work on this is by taking away the changing of the notes and instead just focusing on the rhythm and the articulation. To make this even easier, we're going to do it down the octave to start. So I'm going to play everything on E, okay? Meaning when I have slurs, like the first two notes are slurred sixteenths, that's going to basically be like an eighth note now because it's like they're tied together, okay? So same tempo. Can you imitate that for me, all on low E?
Mm-hmm.
And what I really liked, Tom, is it got better as you went along. It
Okay.
lightened up. So we're going to do it a couple more times. That's the beauty, though, of doing this, is taking away the complexity of different notes and just focusing on the articulation. Okay? Repeat after me. Do 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 do.
Do 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 do.
Yeah, I really like the lightness. And think about nice motion through the phrase too. Do 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 do. You hear the decay that I'm doing? I'm kind of backing off on the longer ones. So listen one more time and then imitate. Do 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 do.
Do 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 do.
Beautiful. And now we're going to do it on our trumpet. Okay.
Okay.
And now, without thinking about it, play it the way it's written. Okay, let's stop there. What do you think? Compare that to the previous time.
I think I was a lot better.
What was better about it? I agree. But what do you specifically?
The attacks felt softer, and it felt like it was again moving forward as opposed to going a little up and down.
For a moment, I want to isolate all the eighth notes. So I'm going to leave out all the 16ths.
Okay.
Okay. And again, I'm thinking about articulation, and part of the articulation is how that note ends. So listening for an ah release and a taper. We'll add in the dotted quarter, okay?
Okay.
So just isolating those eighth notes. Dum, dum, etc.
No, wait a minute.
Just do 2 B's in a row for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and repeat after me. Do, do.
Do, do.
Yeah, there's no tension in that, and the note has a nice release to it. So now when I'm playing everything, I want those releases to be in there. So it's not, basically I'm trying to get you to play those notes a little bit shorter than what you were doing before, having a nice decay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a step in the right direction of where we
Okay.
want to go, you know?
Okay.
And just the more comfortable you get, I think you could kind of fool around with extremes. Like, okay, how softly can I do that and still get the desired result? So, what dynamic do you think that was?
Uh, maybe mezzo piano, hopefully.
Okay, okay. Let's see if we can get a true piano.
Yeah, I don't think I'm a piano yet.
Okay. Still a good breath and a rhythmic breath. Really nice, beautiful tone. I'm hearing good intonation within the range within yourself. So a lot of positives. Maybe just to tweak it a little further, I maybe suggest two things. And the first is thinking about experimenting with slowing your airspeed down just a little bit. Overall, kind of in general, that kind of idea of like fogging up a mirror, that kind of little more relaxed flow of air, which will translate to maybe a little bit warmer sound or just a little more relaxed, a little more lyrical approach. So maybe something like so in general, thinking more rather than it sort of seemed almost like you're coming in a little hot, a little more energetic. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually bringing the volume down, isn't it? Not hitting everything quite so hard, maybe. Trying to relax. The relaxing thing is always a problem, isn't it? Because when you're thinking, I've got to get through this, I don't want to use pressure. You don't want to press too hard, so you're sort of tensing up to keep the pressure off the mouth because you know you've got a long way to go, and then you tend to work too hard at it.
Exactly. And I didn't, in the first time you performed it, it didn't seem like you were working hard. It's almost like a mental approach. Like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So just seeing if you can kind of start from a more relaxed, softer dynamic, and then you have somewhere to go. When we're articulating, especially when we're putting in a ritardando or slowing down at the end of a phrase, I think it actually works a little nicer to be more legato in your approach. So versus
Yeah.
you know,
My teacher when I was at college was I think his second either when he came over. This was a long time ago in the 70s, and he came over. He was a South African, played for the LSO, and he was a first study conductor, but he also played violin. And he always used to say, I use an up bow. So there was that sort of bowing type feel for it rather than attacking. So again, that length of a legato bow. So that was one of his things. Yeah, so yeah, I know what you mean.
bingo. Yeah, exactly. And that makes sense. We're playing a cello suite. So yeah, thinking about how a cellist might bow that, they wouldn't go like down bow, down bow, down bow, down bow. It'd be dee da dee da da. And also just from like a physics of sound perspective, as our tempo slows down, our notes should get longer to fill the space that they take up.
The one you said before about 24, the reason I was doing it that way is those last three notes I do push out. I think of them as I do think of them as down bows. So, for example, the so he leads down to the G sharp.
Okay, sure. You're thinking about uh, a different stylistic approach there. It's a little more emphasized. So before we jump to that, though, I just want to say that previous run through I thought was lovely, and I thought measure 6, your approach to those articulated 16ths, they all had a little more length to them that time, and I really like that because then it shows off more of your tone. We're getting less of an attack and more of just hearing pretty trumpet sound, you know. So with that down bow idea, see this. Just fatter notes in general, slightly longer. Want to keep going into the second half of it? So picking a good, maybe starting right at 25 or getting into it? Yeah, really just lovely. Very expressive. I'm enjoying listening to you. Right when we get into, where does it start? I guess like at measure 30 or measure 32, with these kind of interjections where it's flowy and then you have a note from the bottom that kind of pops out of the texture. I guess let's, like, if we look at measure 32, for example, here, I'm wondering if we could approach some of those measures just trying a few things and see if it can make it even easier. So, you know, an easy, quote unquote, easy practicing technique to do this would be to like take a chunk of this and just slur it. So not doing the printed articulations at all. You want to start like at measure 31, and could you slur, how about those three measures for me? 31, 32, 33. That was awesome. So now I want you to play them the way they're written, and don't change your air when you go for those low notes. Keep the air the same as when you slurred it. It's a really subtle difference, but I feel like the notes came out even easier than they were before, and they're fuller bodied, and we can hear them, but they're not sticking out. Like, it sort of felt like it wasn't matching the character before. When we have several beats of articulated sixteenths, easier said than done, especially when it leaps around all over the place. But I think it could, again, be a little more legato. So thinking like do 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 do. If we take measure 38, for example, one way I like to practice this is I like to slur the measure, and then I like to focus just on my articulation. So I'll articulate that measure all on one note, and then I'll put it all together and I'll play it the way it's written. So something like... got a slight burr on that E, but otherwise it's a little more fluid. So could you try that for me? Slurring the measure, tonguing all on G as legato as possible, and then putting it together. Wow, bravo. That is not easy. That is not easy to do. Yeah, I think well navigated, honestly. I think your articulation is really nice and light, which is allowing you to make it without killing yourself and hammering away at this. Really, it's very, very clean.
I'm trying to make it more cornet-like.
Yeah, isn't that the... Absolutely. And that's the challenge, I think. Am I right that you started at the beginning and your first breath was not until the third line after that B, tied B?
Yeah, after long B.
and you made it.
I have to remember to take a big breath at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have to remember to take a big breath at the beginning.
Yes, yes.
It's the only way to get. I find it's the only. There's nowhere else to breathe.
No, it's super awkward. I mean, I think you have to like, maybe you could sneak one after a dotted eighth note before, you know, you know, that kind of thing. But what I would say with that is, I think you did a very good job. I think you could actually take an even bigger breath. Especially if you can kind of think about it almost like one of the things I talk about is taking a rhythmic breath. So if you're thinking E and a 4 E and a 1 E, if that's your speed, you know, kind of almost like conducting yourself before you start. Kind of thinking a bar of nothing, you know, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and. You know, so I see you taking a breath, but I almost wonder if there's a little bit of tension in that breath, kind of like a here I go, and if instead it could be a low sounding, really relaxed but deep over 1 E and a 2 E and a be da 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 da.
Yeah.
You know,
taking more time to get the breath in.
Yeah, because that's one of the few moments in this whole thing where you have that time to kind of be relaxed, you know. So you might as well make it count. And then similarly, in the next spot where you take a breath after that tied B, you've got a beat of time, so you can kind of think about using that beat, you know. You know, making sure it's really a low sounding big breath.
Yeah.
Could you try another pass at it with that in mind? Really taking those moments that you have and big relaxed breath.
Right, so from the top.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I might interrupt you at some point, but let's at least do a big chunk of it again. And actually, I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry. Let's stop that one more time. So when you took your big breath, I saw a lot of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
If we just think, you know, breathing fat first, right?
Yeah.
My shoulders don't have to go up for that deep breath.
Yeah.
So if we do it without the trumpet once, just kind of thinking, can I see you do that?
Yeah, it's the wedge thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Breathing from there and then from up there. Do that first. Yeah.
Try it one more time. Can you see yourself? Can you look at the monitor when you do it? See if you can take that breath without the shoulders moving.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Lost the fingering on the way down.
How did that feel, though? Up to that point.
It was fine. Yeah, it's fine. I was trying to get a lot of air in, and you forget to take it from down there first rather than up there.
And again, you know, you already have a very nice sound, but on that pass, it was even better. There was a little more sparkle presence to it, and I think it's just we have that added boost of a little extra gas in our tank that can help with that. Yeah, let's do it one more time. And actually, I want you to try. You might hate it, but I want you to try taking a small little sip breath in the third full measure, the last measure in the first line, after that dotted B. So
After the B.
This kind of idea of. So taking that little bit of time, da, 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 and making sure it's a low sounding replacement breath. You play so much of this really well, so now it's just a matter of almost like a great golfer or a great athlete, like making a slight change in their setup, and then it's going to get even more efficient, you know. So you know, if, I'm going to exaggerate, but I hear a little bit of this in that bar where it's where it's really vertical instead of horizontal, you know. So we can skip the stage where you just tongue on one note if you want, even, but just slurring it and then playing it and trying to keep your air the same as when you slurred it. Yeah, I think that was a step in the right direction, for sure.